Encore banger. Dr. Ross dropping knowledge to the masses. Man, you now tuned in to purpose and practice. Ayy, yeah, purpose and practice. Keep your mental sharp, learn all the tactics. Dr. Ross dropping knowledge to the masses. Man, you now tuned in to purpose and practice. Ayy, yeah, purpose and practice. Podcast game, ayy, he got it mastered. It's encore.
Peace to the purpose and practice community, the podcast community, where we bringing you straight, hot fire stories of folks who are out there doing extraordinary things, man. We believe in Sankofa, so we're always reaching back to bring forward. And that's what the guests are all about. Just reaching back, we're going back and we're learning about folks' histories, you know, things that inspired them, things that are important to them, things that they are passionate about, in ways that they want to change the world and leave their mark on the world. That's what this show is all about. But this show could not be this show without you, the community. These intersections that we create, you know, I hear from a lot of you, you know, during the week, whether it's through messages, inboxes, texts, emails, and the guests and their stories are really speaking to you and inspiring you. And that's, you know, that's what we want to do. That's what Inspire is, to breathe life into. That's what we want to do, is to breathe life into the things that you're doing. So with that said, believe it or not, we are in season number 2, episode number 35. Like this project has really taken off. And again, I'm so thankful to my guests, first of all, because they provide the content. And then to you who are out there and you're listening, you're watching, and you're interacting, engaging on the show. I really, really appreciate it. Speaking of engagement, before we get into our guest today, there's something that, you know, I always said I'm not going to be one of those dudes that's like, oh, go like and subscribe. But please head over to the YouTube channel, like, subscribe, and share the page. And this is the way that we just grow the audience and we get more out to the folks out there in the community. So just think of it that way. You know, again, it was like something that I always be like, man, I'm not going to be one of those dudes that's like, oh, go like my page. But it really helps generate traction, you know, and it helps get the story out. So, you know, more folks get involved when you start doing those things. So please head over to the YouTube. If you search up Purpose and Practice on YouTube, you'll find it there. And I'm also going to be dropping later some links to the actual audio. So we're up on Spotify now, so you'll be able to check it out on Spotify. I'll be dropping those links, and then when those other, you know, podcast streaming device or institutions, companies, or what have you, such as Apple iTunes and things like that, once I get clearance on them, I will be dropping them as well. With that said, I hope everybody out here on the East Coast have been enjoying this great weather. It's been beautiful. And we have a special guest today, a brother that I go way back with, you know, was a classmate. We graduated together, was just like an extraordinary. We were talking about it before we got on, an extraordinary athlete. And he was always known as like this phenomenal wrestler. But post high school, and, you know, me following him on social media, I've been just like going crazy about his photography. And it's like really dope photography that you are going to start hearing some background stories about it. It actually, I believe photography is a language. I believe it's a way of communicating, you know, with pictures. And, you know, when we speak a little today, you're going to hear a little bit about that. But telling stories through photos is so powerful. And when you see this brother's photography, you're going to be like, yo, that's dope. So with that said, I'm going to shut up and ask my brother, Craig Mammano, how are you feeling today, brother?
I'm feeling good. I'm a little bit nervous, but I'm feeling healthy. I'm feeling good, man. I'm really happy to be here with you.
Yo, we're happy to have you.
See you.
We are happy to have you. No place to be nervous, man. This is gonna be like you and I just having a conversation. Trust me, with our community. That's all it is, man. But we are very happy to have you, for you committing to be on the show. That's real important to us, real dope to us, man. So once again, welcome. And one of the things, Craig, you know, what we like to do on the show, like I really believe, and you can probably appreciate this as an artist, as a photographer, I really believe context and providing context is really important to the people that, you know, we need to know how we become the people who we are.
Right.
And folks out there need to know that. So a lot of the times what I like to do on the show is kind of go back and, you know, talk about growing up and what growing up was like, you know, where you grew up, you know, what school was like, what kind of student you were, just to kind of give folks some background knowledge on you before we start venturing into the brilliant things that you're doing with photography. So if you don't mind, if you can engage us in that, bro.
All right. Well, so like, you know, I went to high school in Long Branch and middle school, and I got to Long Branch in the middle of 5th grade, where I went to Leonard Conroe.
So you're Leonard Conroe, yeah, because you're on the North End, right? So yeah, that makes
The thing was it was only, you know, I don't remember now, but it was toward the tail end of 5th grade.
Okay.
So it was right in the middle. Me and my 2 brothers and my pops moved from Staten Island, New York, to Long Branch, so a little bit before that, my because it kind of goes along with how my photography practice and stuff. But preceding that, my parents had gotten divorced. We had moved a couple times between parents, and then we had gone from living with my mother to living with my father in Staten Island. We were there from like 3rd grade till 5th when we left and went to Long Branch. So there was a lot of like uprooting in my childhood, having to start over, having to make friends, having to start over in school, you know, being in one place in a school and having to start in a new place in another school. So, you know, people form their mechanisms to cope and to deal with it, and sometimes lash out and stuff like that. You know, so getting to Long Branch, so I had kind of those things going on moving to Long Branch, and like I said, it was like middle of 5th grade. It took me a while to remember, but Mr. Soma's class.
Mr. Soma, yes. 5th grade. Yep, he was a 5th grade teacher at Leonard Conroe. Yes.
So then 6th grade. So, you know, we're at that school. That was the last year of that school. Now it was start a new school. But Long Branch, it was generally, you know, a lot of kids from that school were over there. But when we moved to Long Branch, our next door neighbor, who at the time we didn't know, but was the middle school wrestling coach. And so he sort of observed us for a summer.
Wow.
We got there in the 5th grade and we had summer, and like me and my 2 brothers, he you know, watched us just beat the hell out of each other. And, you know, just single parent house. My pops was working like not in Long Branch, you know, so we had a lot of time to ourselves, especially during the summertime. So I'm sure we just made his life miserable. It was part of it, you know. So starting 6th grade, I think I had maybe signed up for wrestling already. But to be honest with you, because it was big during our generation, I thought it was some Hulk Hogan stuff. I thought it was.
You thought, yeah.
I thought it was pro wrestling. I mean, when I walked in, I was really confused by their not being like a turnbuckle to jump off and like that, you know. So I had signed up for it right before the wrestling season. My mom passed away, and the whole wrestling thing for that time period, you know, and this is, you know, when we look back on things and stuff, man, wrestling saved me. I mean, because we were already kind of on a rowdy path.
Mm-hmm.
Then
Mm-hmm.
my mom passed away, and even adults, but especially kids, you don't know how to process this stuff, and
True.
you don't,
True.
you haven't even come close to like figuring out your emotions and stuff
So
like
true.
that. So in retrospect, I mean, especially during that time, wrestling was, changed my life. I don't know what I would have been doing if I wasn't spending that time. And the thing with that, and with the wrestling, and me being, as you know, so I mean, that was my whole identity.
Yeah.
For
Yeah.
me, when I think about Long Branch, it just, that's who I was in Long Branch. The interesting thing, I mean, that I have figured out was, I mean, I was lucky that it was wrestling that I found.
Mm.
That I put
Mm.
all this emotion and energy into.
Mm.
Really, it was just this big coping mechanism for me.
Mm.
I can't say that it was like I was in love with the sport of wrestling. It was like it helped that early on I had some success. So
Yeah.
I was getting positive feedback from
Yes.
something.
Yes.
And I went with it. I put my head down and I went with it. That's where,
Wow.
that was a good thing for me. And so, yeah, my identity was very wrapped up in that whole thing. I mean, I spent my summers, traveling the country to go to wrestling tournaments
Mhm.
and doing camps, and everything by high school somewhat involved wrestling
That's yeah.
in some way.
And that and it's crazy because that's like I said, like we've had more conversations in wrestling, but there's, in high school, even middle school, but high school more so, it's almost like we get stamped with these identities
Oh, without
and and those things, they kind of like they define us
yeah.
for maybe lack of a better explanation, but they begin to define us.
Um,
So in wrestling, but you said something that really stands out to me. As you said, I'm glad that I found that, or that wrestling found me, as opposed to getting wrapped up in finding other ways
yeah.
to spend my time. You know, I think that that's really important. I was just talking to a young person just 2 days ago. She was one of my former students, and she was talking about, she lost, and I remember when it happened. She lost her mother when she was in ninth grade, and she was talking about grief counseling. Like, they were trying to get her to talk to a counselor at the school,
Right.
and she was like, "Man, I don't want to talk to anybody." Like she just thought it would be this whole weird thing where all the person would be asking about was her mom.
Right.
And she finally gave in, had the conversation, and she was like, we developed a relationship. And she said, believe it or not, she never even talked about my mom. It was more about developing this positive relationship and opening up other things to me as a student in other worlds. And she was like, that kind of took my mind. So when
Right.
you said that, Craig, it kind of made me think of that conversation that I just had.
Yeah. Yeah. No, more down the road, I found out, because so continuing so after high school, uh,
Mhm.
I I went to George Mason University,
Mhm.
Northern Virginia,
Yep.
and for wrestling, it was a Division I school, and I, I was I was really good for Long Branch. I was good for our area, and then
Mhm.
state wise, I was so
Mhm.
I had a partial scholarship to go to George Mason, but I was also I believe it was called Prop 38. I was a horrible student.
Prop 40, is it Prop 48? I think it is.
I
I
think
think
it
it's
was
48. Yeah,
40.
yes, yes.
So
Yep,
they
yep,
basically give you a chance
yes.
to
I
see
think
if you can handle it.
yes.
So that's the other thing. If it wasn't for Long Branch, I mean, if it wasn't for wrestling, I would have had no chance at continuing my education. Yeah. So I was at George Mason for 2 years. I redshirted during that period, and then I wrestled my second year, but just my first year in college, so here's the thing. I buried myself in this wrestling. I didn't do too much. The thing is I was putting my energy into something, but I wasn't dealing with any emotional things. I wasn't dealing with the head stuff at all. It was all physical, which was great. But once I got to college, it was like kind of the typical thing that they say. I just sort of like I had all this freedom. I started to really question my wrestling and high school experience, as far as like, man, I missed out on, like, people ask. I could count in high school. I drank 2 times. I got drunk once and drank twice. And now I'm in this college environment. I'm trying to figure stuff, and they're like, "What were you doing for like 4 years?" And I was training. And now I'm to a point where, no, that was great. But so during that time in college, I started to feel like, yo, what was that? Like, I just, like, who am I?
Yes.
I'm starting to figure out, like, yo, I'm not going to be a pro wrestler. I'm way too small. I'm not, I realized by that time I wasn't gifted enough to go to the Olympics.
Yeah.
So now,
wow.
And at that point, like freshman year in college, I mean, really my only plan was to continue wrestling, be a gym teacher, and be a wrestling coach. That's that's what I kind of had figured out. And then once I started to sort of drift from wrestling, like, man, do I want to starve all week to make weight? To do this? Like, is this what I want to do right now? And the answer slowly was coming to me that no, this was not what I wanted to do anymore. But it was super tough to separate from, because like we said in the beginning, it was my whole identity. It was only that. And then just this may be corny, but I called like Coach George, high school wrestling coach, like to talk to him about it first, because I felt so like that. About to break away from this.
Yes.
Man. And like apologizing to him, like,
yes.
You put all this time into me.
Yep.
You put all this time. And obviously from his perspective, he had obviously no problem with it at all. Craig. It really wasn't about the wrestling. I mean, it would have been great if we won some championship ring, but it really wasn't about that.
It's crazy that you say that, because I talk to young people a lot. I'm blessed to have a job where I get to engage with a lot of young people, and especially high school students, right? And one of the things that I always talk to them about is, you may climb mountains, right? If you think about it this way, things that you're interested in, that you climb mountains, that you want to pursue, passions, and you make it halfway up that mountain and say, you know what? I don't know, like this. I'm not on fire about this like I once was.
Right.
And I was like, you have to be willing to, rather than torture yourself and continue to climb that mountain, and begin to really, hate yourself, because you're setting yourself up for something every day that you have no interest in at all anymore. I said, you got to be willing to come down off that mountain and then find the right mountain. And then if that next mountain's not the right one, you got to be willing to come down. I said, because when you start building up these images in your head of people who are going to be upset, people are going to think you failed, people are going to think you're a loser. I said, those are the things, and they will stick in you. You will have those trapped in your mind forever. And there'll come a point you'll be like, in your life, later in life, like, man, I should have just listened to what I was really passionate about. So if you don't mind, Craig, can you talk a little bit about, you got to the call with Coach George, you know,
Yeah.
and we never want to disappoint our coaches. I don't care. It can be 20 years after, you know, when you had good coaching relationships with your coach, you never, first of all, you always call them coach, and you never want to disappoint them. Right. So can you talk to how you got to that point? Was it a snap decision of like, all right, it's over? Or did you process through it to get to a point of like, all right, here's what I need to do to break away, and these are the folks that I want to let know?
Right. You know, to be honest, it wasn't super well thought out. You know, I've realized, and once I realized, been able to gauge myself, but I run highly off of emotion. You know, and knowing that now, you know, I can process a bit and then make decisions. But at that time, you know, I can't say there was one thing that triggered it. You know, it was the other thing that was going on down in Virginia was that I wasn't enjoying the campus culture. You know, it's a crazy thing coming from Long Branch. You know, I was really glad to hear I caught this talk that Jay Corley had done with Terry King.
Okay.
And they were just talking about, you know, this sort of like Long Branch bubble that we had that, you know, you know, I'm sure there's many things that I didn't see and stuff, you know, but for my day-to-day life, you know, and part of it was the wrestling team, part of it was sports, you know, that I had friends of different colors and you know, Virginia was weird, was the most south I had gone by that time, you know, and something, and I can't say there was anything in particular, but it's something. I also run highly off of vibes, you know. If I'm not when I'm comfortable, you know, I know there's something to it, you know.
True.
And I wasn't comfortable between just the kind of separating of people on campus. Besides that, you had the added wrestling thing to where now there wasn't a wrestling fraternity, but it basically was like
its own,
its own fraternity. And you know, after the first few months of hanging out and getting over the excitement of the partying and new friends and stuff like that, you know, I found myself stepping back, you know, a bunch like, I don't like these people that much. I don't like the way, you know, sir. I don't like the way they roll. You know, it was and like I said, that was a weird thing because I was wrestler Craig, like I was supposed to be testosterone filled Craig, and I was feeling more like, hey man, I want to go like check out the museum. What?
And you know, but you also you were coming from a vantage point from what I'm gathering, what you're saying, you know, and knowing about Long Branch, growing up in Long Branch myself, that we did have a lot of intersections in terms of race and culture and diversity. Right. And we really, really, whether it was through sports, but even outside of sports, there was a mesh, you know, of those things, you know, whereas I can easily see, and when I went off to college, I went to a college that actually I went to Jersey City, which resembled a lot of what I was used to. So I could only imagine leaving Long Branch and then going, like you said, to Virginia. And it's not deep South, but you know, you're headed, you know, closer, you know, to that line. You know, I can only imagine that when you talk about vibes and you start feeling different vibes and getting a sense of things. So I totally get that, you know, I work off of energy too. I think energy is very important. So you had the wrestling thing going on. But then you also had that whole feeling of like what the culture was
Yeah.
in the school period, you know.
Mm.
So you had a few things pushing you to like, all
Right.
right, this might not
Yeah.
be the move.
Right. So so I'm trying to think. I think by that time I was a sophomore in college, and I had a couple roommates. We were living in a house, and I think what helped was one of the roommates decided to transfer.
Mm.
So he was learning about the process and
Mm.
do paperwork and all
Yeah.
that. So I'm pretty sure that helped spark the idea, like,
Yes.
I can leave.
Yeah.
I don't have to stay. I mean, the tricky thing, that at the time was sort of difficult. It wasn't a full scholarship, but I was getting some of school paid for with this. And so I had been taking a few art classes there in my 2 years.
Okay.
And I got good, I can't say in the beginning it was just like, hey, I know I'm an artist but I was taking some art classes, and almost like the wrestling, I was getting some good feedback early on, here and there. And so when I started looking for schools, I had a few things, I had to consider my grades. And actually, crazy thing is I did great in college. Like, I was a horrible high school student. And because they wanted to make me eligible for wrestling that freshman year, I had tutors, I had everything I needed.
Yep.
And I was like, whoa, so this is what I have to do.
Yes.
And just a little add in, like in high school, I was doing real bad in high school, and they, I don't know if it was because I was a good wrestler, but they were interested in why I wasn't doing well and how they could help me. And so I was tested, and so they found that I had a learning disability.
In high school? That was in high school. Wow.
Yeah. So like maybe sophomore year in high school.
Okay.
I was classified, and I don't exactly know what it means. I know the outcome of it, but perceptually impaired. What they labeled me at the time. So from like sophomore year through, I was in special education. And at that time, special education wasn't the greatest. As far as my classroom was they were doing maybe what they could at the time, but my classroom was, me and Ben Petak and Louis Alford.
Wow.
And it was a mix of problems and stuff.
Yes.
Just thrown
put
together
to one. Yes.
Us and Miss Odom.
Yes.
All day, except for like gym class and so. But in college, they were able to give me the help. And this is a little bit where the photo comes into photography for me, is that I realized for me to get information to stick, I have to hear it, I have to read it, I have to see it. I need some sort of cues that can get me going. Otherwise, it doesn't sink in for me. I could read the same page 10 times, at that time in my life. And I wasn't.
The comprehension wouldn't be the comprehension. Yes.
At all,
Yes.
Yes. So I found that out in college. So, sorry, I jumped back and forth.
No, bro, but you know what? But those are first of all, that's the kind of context that we need. Secondly, even the piece about classification, and usually learning disabilities classifications are picked up between kindergarten, 5th grade, and I know that having that kind of pretty much experience as a high school student, that's difficult in itself. Right. Like that.
Man, you don't know how many times like in the beginning, and whatever, this is shameful, but in the beginning, how I'd be sneaking out of that classroom.
Yeah.
And when friends would be asking, where you been all day?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I only see you at gym, and it was, and at that time, special education has come a long
way. Yes.
It has more to go,
yes.
but it's come a long way. At that time, man, it was tough to say, they had names for it. They had names for it.
Yeah. And that's why I say it, because there's a stigma that was connected, especially more so then. And when you say we come a long way, we have, in terms of from a legislative standpoint, in terms of what policy looks like for students, even training of teachers and staff. But then also in terms of empowerment of students, who have disabilities, who have challenges. I think that there's more of an empowerment piece in good situations anyway. But that's why, when you said that, because I'm thinking as an educator myself, I'm like, wow. So, having a classification as a sophomore in high school, that's a lot different than, hey, you're a second grade, you're third grade, you learn, you get the support, and if things are right, you're not in a highly restrictive environment, and then you start working through these challenges. But to get it in high school, but then for you to even be able to navigate through that experience and still end up eligible to wrestle at the collegiate level.
it was. I say a lot. I have dumb luck. I don't have great luck like I win the lottery, but I have luck that certain people and situations come into my life and are very helpful. The Mr. Hausers and Coach George's. And later on in photography, Joseph Rodriguez. People have popped up in my life that it's like, man, I'm one lucky dude. Like, how did I just run into you and start talking to you? And
and thank you for sharing that story, Craig, because another thing that happens with this podcast, a big piece of it is for young people. And I think that young, there's student athletes out there right now who needed to hear that story. They needed to hear what you just said. Like they needed to hear that. And that may help them on their journey in terms of thinking, why me? Or, how am I going to be able to be a Division I athlete or Division II or III athlete? Or how am I going to be able to go to college, period? Does special education mean I can't go to college? So I'm happy that you shared that story. And Miss Elgram, Jennifer Elgram, who's a phenomenal special education teacher in Long Branch, New Jersey, who I have a lot of respect for. She just put in the chat, yes. Because, those experiences and you sharing that really, really is helpful. So I thank you. I thank you for doing that. And you're in college and you start talking about art classes.
Right.
Like,
so
what were you like? What kind of classes were you taking?
I think the beginning one, I remember making a lot of collages and stuff. And to be very honest with you, in the beginning, it was like I can get 3 easy credits if I go draw. That's honestly, that's the way
how you got.
Well, because at that time, still being on track for to be a gym teacher, I'm like shocked that I'm in kinesiology class. And I'm like, wait, what?
What?
I thought this major was like, I already know. I thought this was going to be super easy.
Like, how do I put people in squads? How do I do layup? Like, pickleball. I
figured that was every class. So at that time, I think I was just balancing my schedule with what I perceived at the time as some easier classes,
Gotcha.
And then I just started getting interested in it. And it's a funny thing. It did come back to me later on that as a kid, my mom used to always tell me that I was artistic.
Wow.
And I was doing little silly kid art and stuff, but when she passed and all that, it was just heading to wrestling and stuff. So anyway, that sort of came to me, So I think I was then leaving George Mason. So trying to find a school to go to. I had pretty good college grades by that time, but money was a real obstacle, And I knew I didn't want to wrestle anymore. But I did end up, when I transferred, so I found a school in Manhattan called Hunter College.
Okay. Yes.
So what attracted me to that school was so they had an art program and stuff. And by that time I was like, well, I think at least for now, I'm going to go this route. They also had a Division III wrestling team. So the thing with trying to go to some of these different schools I was looking at that I could get accepted to, or that I had been accepted to, was cost of living. How I was going to do this, and without any kind of, at least that financial help. I was on
aid.
But Hunter College, they had a very, there's no big campus. It's like two big buildings, and at least the main campus, and they have a dormitory downtown that's right across the alleyway from Bellevue Medical Hospital.
Okay.
It used to be like for nurses and stuff. They have a really big nursing school in there over there that they're known for. But with the wrestling, thing is so they had dormitories, but it was very hard to get into because it was the cheapest living in Manhattan, in New York.
Yeah, because you're in.
Hunter College was the cheapest. I mean, of any of the schools. So I ended up going to Hunter and wrestling for half-heartedly, which, in retrospect, I feel bad about that with the coach over there. Because I knew I was half-heartedly. I needed a place to live. So there was about a semester of wrestling left in me once I actually got to Hunter College, and probably not so gracefully stopped the wrestling at some point during that first year in New York. And then I was an art major at that time. So I ended up graduating from Hunter College in 1999. But so we're finally getting to the photography.
Go ahead.
So yeah, I was taking a lot of art classes, and I was getting close to like having to look at graduation and what my credits were looking like and stuff. And and I was really into sculpture, and I was really into photography. Really, one of the first big pushes that I got artistically was more in sculpture from this great artist, Nardi Ward, who still teaches over there, but he was really young at that time. He might have been like an adjunct or just starting out, but it was a little thing, but he just said to me after class, you should think about applying for this summer program. It was like, go to a different country and work on sculpture, or, some sort of exchange program.
Yeah.
And not that I did apply for it. I didn't. But that he thought I could.
Yeah.
I was like, wait, why? It really stuck with me all these years. I'm just saying that to me. Like I said, I didn't follow the advice at the time, but I was just like.
But it did something to you, though.
It totally did something to me, man.
It did. You've talked about, whether you want to call it positive reinforcement, whether we want to call it affirmations, whether we want to call it speaking things into existence for folks, coaches, teachers, adults, period. If you have an opportunity to speak some positive life in future self, some positive future self things into young people, do it.
Right.
And I'm not saying just go, I'm not saying be genuine with it, obviously.
Right.
You know, like be genuine, because you've mentioned that 3 times.
Yeah.
You've mentioned that.
No, and that's what I mean. I mean, as far as my what I like to call dumb luck, and then I know at some point, you know, we'll touch on spirituality and stuff, and this is where I really, you know, whatever I'm watching when people are dropped in front of me. You know,
Yes.
you know,
Yes.
and part of the effects with, you know, the childhood trauma that I went through and stuff, and you know, it is just being open to things. You don't know where they're coming from. I've gotten great life advice on the subway randomly in a 30-second conversation that, I know was meant to be.
Yeah, true.
I know, you know, that at that time, and part of it is just, obviously I needed to hear something at the time, but being able to stop and listen to somebody. And I'm much more with what the trauma did with me is that I'm much more of, I listen way more than I talk, you know, and part of that is getting comfortable. And, you know, we had mentioned the control thing earlier with getting ready with the technology and stuff, but it's sort of the same thing, you know, so much is out of your control. But man, if I could sit back and listen and sort of figure out what's going on with these cats first before I jump in here and not just jump out at people.
Yes.
You know, there's a lot smoother transition to to conversation.
You know, I think you just really, you dropped a gem, man. And it's funny because your art and your photography, which I know we're going to talk about, but the way I see it, when I look at it and what I love about it is it seems to be more of what's going on in the margins. Like it's kind of hard to explain, but as a person, I believe that sometimes you can go to an event, like we can all sign up and say, all right, I'm going to church, right? And you're going to church because you want to get a word, right? And the word that you get may not be at that focal point in the church. It may be on the subway to the church. Right. It may be when you're stopping to get a cup of coffee. And it may come from someone who you would never assume you would get the word from that day. So in when you said that, it was like, it was so deep and it was so profound, because I think that we are so programmed to think, to be closed. Yes. And think that we're supposed to get certain things from certain places. And sometimes things can be, as you said, dropped in front of us, and folks can be in our lives and we never really take advantage of that.
Right.
So I just had to draw that because I'm always fascinated by, I always say the greatest things happen in the margins. And I always tell teachers that. Teachers always want to know, how do I develop relationships with kids? I was like, you know how you do it? Show up in places that they're at, but not in school. All right. Like see them at an athletic event, see them on stage if that's something that they're interested in.
Right.
But believe it or not, the best relationships aren't going to form when you're in the classroom. In the hallway, it may just be stopping. Hey, what's going on? How are you? Right. That's how you begin to form. So when you said that, it just struck with me like, wow, that's kind of what I believe when it comes to, you know, relationship building.
Yeah. Yeah, no, totally. Yeah. And as far as, you know, the, with, let me see, from Hunter College. So I graduated in 1999. So come around graduation time, I saw I had more photography credits than I did in sculpture. So it was, you know, I graduated with a degree in art studio with a focus in photography.
Wow.
So this is 1999. So like the very next year, and I'm sure it was starting a bit before this, but digital is on the heels of, I was being taught all film photography and stuff. That everything is changing. So anyway, when I got out of school, I didn't know what, like, okay, I have an art degree. I'm an artist. What,
Like, what do I?
how do I survive now? You know, it was crazy at that time. You know, so many, um, uh, almost missteps
Mm,
as far as
mm,
paths I'd
mhm.
like, and all just from feeling like I was backed into a corner. You know, like anytime these student loans are going to start wanting to get repaid now.
Yes.
Now, what am I going to do? You know,
Yes.
and luckily, so around that time, I was searching for tickets to a Black Star, the hip hop group.
Talib and Mos Def?
Most Def.
Wow.
I was I was looking for tickets to their show,
Okay.
and while looking for tickets to their show, I found uh, the Black Star uh, photo archive, and they were looking for interns, and not that it was a paid internship, but I had done a bit of interning
Yeah.
in college, and I realized right away if I was ever gonna get a job,
It
it was
was
all gonna be through
yeah.
interning
Yes.
because the little jobs that I got in like film industry during the college years and was on this wacky show, Blues Clues.
Oh, yeah, yeah, yeah.
They had me put that guy's shirt on for film test. Anyway, so I realized that interning
Was
was
yeah.
aspect that, yo, man, if you worked hard and people liked you and stuff, you
Mhm, mhm.
that was a way in because I was,
So true.
I wasn't good at making my resume and the
Mhm.
interview process. I would think too much and get nervous and
Yeah.
nightmare interviewer. Um, so I decided I'll do this. I went and applied and got this internship at the Black Star Photo Agency, and another for me meant to be type of things. The I was an intern for maybe a month, and then they hired me. And my job at that time was digitizing their film archive. So this is like just when
On the
everything is
cusp of yeah.
digital. You know,
Yeah.
really, what my job was to put me out of a job because my job
Yeah,
was
because everything was going now. Yes.
digitized. It was like no more job. Um, but so I was there maybe for 2 years or so, but I was digitizing work and then one day photographers would come in and out. The Black Star Photo Agency, um, two things. One, they're pretty historic at I think they have pieced out their archive to some bigger archives now.
Mhm.
They don't exist the way they used to. They used to have these big photo archives that when a magazine or a newspaper needed an image that they didn't have a
They would
photographer,
go
they would go to this place because they had photographers all over the world and stuff.
mm,
Um, so photographers would always come in and out. You chit chat with them a bit, and a lot of times they weren't very nice. You'd ask them a couple
yeah.
questions, and most people acted like you're trying to get my job, or
Yeah. Yeah.
whenever you're working in the office, not worth to talk to. And I don't know where this guy comes in. His name was Joseph Rodriguez, and um, this guy, real quick, really amazing backstory. He had a rough youth. He did a few really long bids on Rikers Island.
Mm,
At starting as a youth,
wow.
and he heroin addiction, all these things that this dude went through while he was in a methadone program. He got into photography, and this guy, it took him years of putting himself together, and but he interned at photo places. He taught himself photography. And so for like 2 or 3 years as a New York City taxi driver, I grabbed this real fast. He was photographing up in Spanish Harlem.
Wow.
And so, but crazy. So this guy goes from, he's on a methadone program he's driving a cab, he's making this work, but now he's starting to get in, little internships, even mopping the floors there's a big New York City ICP, the International Center of Photography. Starts kind of working there, maintenance, just to be in the place.
Just to be around, just to be, yes. Energy, yes.
He meets the right teacher over there, who they're still really tight. This guy ends up like for 2 years working on this project. When he finishes, becomes I think it was 86 National Geographic cover story.
Wow.
Like amazing story, and really amazing human. So that guy, he sees me in the office digitizing film, and people were just starting to get like kind of home scanners and stuff, and and he didn't know anything about it, but I was kind of learning as I was going, because I was taught all film. It wasn't digital. It was changing, which really sucked, man. I mean, I came out of school and
it was almost like a wasted. Yeah, it was.
The whole industry changed. I mean, journalism changed. Everything changed.
It flipped. Yep.
Totally flipped. So he saw me using the equipment and really at first sort of befriended me, because it was like, yo, man, you need to teach me. I need your help. But there was a huge give and take with this. I mean, he was like, you could come intern for me. Basically, so after working at Black Star during the day, then at nighttime, I would go to Park Slope, Brooklyn, and intern for this guy, sometimes for hours. And, he became like a homie and a friend. And but my interning was like, scanning stuff, sometimes getting his clothes from an ex-girlfriend. It was a helper and stuff. We became super tight. And so up until that point, photographically, there's lots of different photographic genres. You could be a fashion photographer. There's tons of different routes you can go with this. And I hadn't exactly found any route. I took a lot of photo classes, and I was making some pictures and stuff. And but Joseph's photography was amazing. It was just real life. And I was like, whoa, there's like, you could tell stories with this stuff. It's not just one perfect picture of someone looking their best, with the best lighting. And the other thing was Black Star Photo Archive. They have the biggest archive of civil rights pictures. And so during this time, so I'm interning for Joseph, and I'm looking at all his photography and stuff, and had a bunch of really important social documentary books that he made. But at the same time, I had gone from digitizing film to they had kind of upgraded my job, and now I was a photo researcher. There was a little bit more money in it. And as a photo researcher, which I was terrible at, but it was all right. The photo researcher thing, which I explained before, I was terrible at, because I would get sent to go look for a picture of George Bush or something. I'd start going through archives, and I'd start finding these civil rights pictures, man. This photographer, Flip Schulke, that he's got like these really famous and terrible, but they needed the pictures at the time of, like, down south police dogs and stuff. And So this is
that the one? Is that classic picture with the dog? Is
uh-huh.
that's his work?
Yes,
Yes.
this
Like
archive.
it's jumping at, yes. I
Yes,
think little kids, little black, yeah.
yeah. Almost every like civil rights picture
Yeah.
that sticks in our brains, what was from this photo archive, all different photographers and stuff
Yes.
from
Yes.
this photo agency. So that was the thing, man. There was, thousands and thousands and thousands of pictures
Oh.
of the civil rights movement that I'm looking at every day. But I wasn't exactly supposed to be. I was supposed to be finding pictures. I was terrible at getting back to people like, I couldn't find something for that. And, it came to a point with that job, I had told the boss there that, I'm super grateful for all the opportunity, but I want to be a photographer now. And, I'm starting to look with the people that I'm working with, and I'm starting to vibe that, they wanted to be a photographer like 20 years ago also.
And they never got out of it. Yes.
And you know what? Richard is one pissed off dude.
I'm sure.
He's not a happy person, and I saw that, so I told them, I'm going to quit, or I gave him tons of notice. Tons of notice. And they gave me a shot, and my shot was like Hillary Clinton. It was like her first run at Senate.
Okay.
So it was election night, and so the money shot, the one you're going to get paid for over and over again, is of Hillary and her camp. No one remembers who she ran against, right?
Yeah.
That's what they sent me, because none of their photographers.
Yeah.
None of their top photographers wanted to go shoot that. So they were like, you're hungry.
Whatever.
Go check it out. I was super excited, and I found out fast that that type of photography is not for me. It was, you were shooting with a lens that was like this big from across the room.
Because you got it. Yeah. It's not intimate. It's not that yet.
And you're fighting people.
Pushing
people, trying to get your picture and stuff. And although, cats that know me as a wrestler, Craig, might think so, but I'm actually not a very aggressive person. No, it was not my style. So that was a little disheartening, to be honest with you. It was like, I was given this shot, and I was just like, man, this is, I might have gotten a few pictures, but no one really cared. That none of those pictures were going to sell anyway, So there was that. And so hanging out with Joseph, I was still kind of fumbling, trying to like, what is this cause that I care about? What am I trying to photograph? What am I looking at? And so I still thought like, doing these documentaries slower, well, really, I was still thought I could be a photojournalist at that time. Then September 11th happens. So when September 11th happened, I was affiliated still with that Black Star photo agency.
Okay.
And on the actual day, they at some point I had gotten in contact with them, and they were giving press credentials and bags of film to any photographer they
could get out there
contact with. So I'm uptown. I make my way downtown to ground zero, or as close as I could get with the credentials that I had. Mm-hmm. And everything was in slow motion, man. And, by the end of it, I also I'm not a photojournalist. It's not in my bones. And here's the thing that for me, it's a genre that's needed, people need to see, visually
Mm-hmm.
certain things are happening for them
Mm-hmm.
to, and for some change to happen sometimes. But seeing them surrounded by a bunch of photographers, getting the picture, and then that photographer just bouncing off to the next person. And like I said, I'm not saying this as like being hateful to photojournalists.
True. It's important. Yeah. Yeah.
It's a certain type of person. And man, that shit was very depressing to me to find out. Like, yo, once again,
So there's two, yeah, like. So you start questioning, like, yo,
now what? Now, and I'm still feeling like, I'm into this, but where's this going? What am I gonna do? And the documentary started coming to light for me a little bit more. And not that I'm a documentary photographer really, but more the time spent on something. A photojournalist only has a certain amount of time, and these days almost zero time, before it is going to get published. So documentary was really slowing things down. So I started going more that route. And like I said, I wouldn't say that I'm exactly like a documentary photographer, because I'm totally biased. I'm not a photographer that's like, and I thought in the beginning that's the way you had to be. And during the like early assignments that I had like at Black Star, I thought this is what you had to do. But man, I lost my track real fast.
You were on you were on basically, you realize, but you're not actually a photojournalist. You don't see yourself as that specifically.
Right. So just slowing it down to be able to spend time. And part of what I found out with myself was just I really couldn't photograph unless I was 100% comfortable. If I know you're comfortable with me taking your picture, there is some street photography, that maybe you don't have a long connection, but I've got to be very comfortable taking pictures. I most times I have a camera with me because I don't know when things are going to go down, and not some big event, but just when I'm going to start vibing with somebody and things are going to make sense, I started, trying to do little documentaries and stuff, and I fumbled for years and projects, just as far as trying to figure out, something big is access. How easily can you get back to a place? I started off going back to Virginia and visiting some people down there and trying to photograph down there certain things. But then it was like, I could only come back so often, and just for me, just for me to be comfortable to photograph and for this to make sense, that wasn't working either, being some sort of travel photographer to find these stories. So to make this long story short, I started realizing that everything was really close to me. All the stories, if I was going to photograph anything with any consistency, I had to be able to access it easily. So that kind of started me on a path of photographing people around me, friends, and people that were, all my New Orleans work, or 99% of it is right in front of the house that I was living, or this way on the block or that way on the block. There's some around the other corner, but most of it is right there,
And you would never, looking at those photos though, you would think like this is the whole city. Like it is it's just like, but
You know,
go
yeah.
ahead. Go ahead.
No, there's a few, you know, that are like when we first got down there. There's a few different areas in some of them, but yeah, most of it is just from one spot.
So I want to talk a little bit about New Orleans because um you know how you made it down there. You know, how you were driven to make it there.
Yeah. Um, so uh, I'm gonna jump a piece, but I to get to the New Orleans. So from New York, I eventually all through college and years after, uh, the lady that I'm still partners with and have 2 children with, we were like we met at Hunter College.
Oh,
Um,
okay. Okay.
and
We can't jump that, man. You be sle- I don't want
right,
you sleeping on the floor, bro. Like, listen.
um, so so we had met in college, uh, and then after college for a couple years, you know, we were living. She was still going to. She was working and going to school, and then we broke up. And this actually was a little bit before the whole September 11th story and stuff.
Okay.
We had broken up, and then when we got back together, I that's how I ended up coming to Seattle. She
Okay.
was her family's from Seattle. Um,
Okay.
so um, about 2003, um, probably one of the last times that like I actually saw you because it was pretty close to after my brother's
The
wedding.
wedding. Yeah, I was gonna say that. Yep. Yep.
Because then I bounced to Seattle. I'm in Seattle and still trying to do my photo thing, but you know, I was a little bit lost. In New York, I was working at that archive. I was also
Uh-huh.
period working in a photo a lab printing photographs, like but museum quality photographs. Not that I was a top printer like that, but same thing. I was interning there and getting to use their facility
Mm-hmm.
for free. I mean, that's how I was able to
Mm-hmm.
pay for all my film and stuff like that. Was I gave them a day and I got to use
And it,
everything for free. And um, but let's see. So when I got to Seattle, you know, I was a little bit lost, and I was like, you know what, I need to do something outside of photography to make my money because I'm finding out like attaching making my living to this thing that I still think I love to
yeah,
do
like, mm-hmm.
is getting really frustrating because I'm not able to make money doing it, you know. And you know, like I don't want to hate this, you know.
Yes.
And I also found from working in the photo lab and the archive that for me personally, working in the genre of photography, but not doing the part that I wanted to do, the picture
Taking
taking,
the pictures. Yeah.
really took away from my love
Yeah.
for photography. You
Yeah.
know, it's just a job could be anything to me at that point.
Mm-hmm.
So when I came out to Seattle out of nowhere, I'm like, I'm gonna learn like a trade or something, you know. So not that I went to trade school or anything, but I became a maintenance man. I ended up working in this Section 8 building and was a maintenance man there for like 2 years. And uh, then Hurricane Katrina happened while I was here in Seattle.
Okay.
And, so like everybody else, you know, I'm watching everything on the news and stuff, and uh, I think it was Paia that's my lady and kids'
Okay.
mother. We think in the beginning it was her idea that to go down and volunteer. You know, so our original trip down there was we went to go see a friend of mine that I knew from New York, but he was originally from Orlando.
Mm-hmm.
Went to go visit him, and then we drove from Orlando to New Orleans. And our little plan was in between that drive, we would get married, and then we would gut houses in New Orleans and see what's actually happening down here. You know,
Wow.
And so the way it ended up going down was we leave my friend Vincent's house in Orlando. We make it to New Orleans without getting married. So we're in New Orleans. So we were staying in FEMA tent, this FEMA tent for volunteers, but we were volunteering for Acorn, and they've got a interesting history and stuff. But so we were volunteering with them, gutting houses, and our volunteer coordinator, Brian Lewis, who this is one of those times that people are like dropped in front of you.
Yes.
You know, he was, so we tell him, hey, Brian, tomorrow, I think we were there for a week volunteering. Tomorrow, we're going to either be a little bit late or leave a little bit early. We're going to go get our marriage license. And he's like, I'm a reverend.
Wow.
I can marry y'all after work, after our day of volunteering tomorrow. I could do it tomorrow. and me and my lady, now part of our getting married on the road was that we're both a little bit shy. Not about being in front of never my dream to
have a huge wedding.
It's like, we'll do it quiet and in front of nobody, And the next day, Brian has like his church singers there. He has a wedding cake. He's got flowers and like the garter belt and the veil for my lady.
Wow.
Toasting mugs, the cake with our name on it, and a photographer from the Times-Picayune. Who?
Wow.
I'm all about the show and tells, but the Acorn.
Oh man, that's crazy. So that's the photo in the slide thing. That's the one.
That opening picture. It's funny. So that picture is. So there was so our wedding ended up being. So besides all that, we also had all the volunteers. Like they grabbed all volunteers from Acorn that day.
Went down, and they all came.
It was a really big wedding and quite the scene with the Times-Picayune there photographing and stuff.
Wow.
But what Brian did for us, I mean, Brian was from New Orleans. He was not only coordinating cleanup, he was dealing with his own life and stuff,
Yeah.
And he put this all
together,
trying to make us feel special, and it was, it was hard to process. I mean, really hard to process. Like,
because I'm sure you're like, all right, why is this happening, or how is this happening?
And just like doing this for us, and so there's Brian's like love and kindness that overwhelmed me. But also, Miss Sandra was the lady that the house we gutted, that we got married in front of in Lake Pontchartrain, which is, they had water past the top of their roofs. She happened to be there that day. A lot of people weren't there while they were gutting their houses and stuff. Another horrible thing. Just, dumping people.
It's traumatic. Traumatic.
So Miss Sandra, after, we had just gutted her house. Down to the drywall off the walls, bare bones house. Everything that she raised her family with, everything is in the house. We had just thrown out, and she was one of our witnesses for our marriage certificate. But this was like the thing that kind of brought me like over the top, was she slips me $100.
Wow.
and me being,
Someone who, yeah.
and me being like, you know, too emotional, and like I just, you know, I had, to be honest, I had a bad reaction in that I was just like, oh my God, no, I can't.
Yeah.
I can't.
Yeah.
And I don't exactly remember how she did it, but she put me in my effing place.
Yeah. Like you're gonna accept
Told,
it.
and told me I was, and I caught on real fast. Once I started comment, I was, you know, very apologetic. But yeah, that was super overwhelming. And other people on the trip, you know, there was some Vietnamese shrimpers that we met also, that just, these people's stories and their kindness, that I just, to be honest, it was hard to process and understand how you're giving me this and how you're being this nice, and like, yo, I
Going
see
through, yes.
what you're going through right now, you know.
Yes.
That after that trip, we made it back to we did come back to Seattle, and you know, and after a couple weeks, you know, so I'm a maintenance man at that time, not in love with my job.
I can imagine. I can imagine.
By any stretch of the imagination. And you know, and it was something I saw in the news that like it was like the first Mardi Gras after the storm, that you know, they made a big deal that
I remember. Yes. Yep.
they were able to put on Mardi Gras, and not that that was a bad thing at all, but I had just been there, and I saw, you know, and all the news I was seeing was like, all right, well, Mardi Gras is back, things are getting back.
Yeah.
You know, there's people coming back to, you know, to party in the quarter and stuff. And I'm seeing these things, like things are getting better. I'm like, you know, I just left there.
I was just,
It's years. It's years and years and years. Like, you know, and with that said, I had already, with dealing with a little bit of the media and stuff, and being a photo researcher, I had seen the power of media.
Yes.
And how they can,
yes,
just
the spinning, and yes, yep,
they can make you think what we want you to think and stuff, you know. So so seeing all that, and the experiences that we had with people, once again, it might have been Paia with the initial jump, but we were like, you know what, let's move down there. You know, I was a maintenance man. You know, I wasn't on some sort of grand track at that time. You know, and we weren't, you know, we didn't have kids. We weren't leaving anything behind, you know. And we were like, you know, I want to see how this is gonna go down. I want to keep watching what they're telling everybody is going on,
and then what's really going on.
See what is going on at the same time, and see what BS it is, because I know it is. But you know, part of the hope was that we could capture that, you know. So that's how we got down there. You know, it was a wild story getting down there, but
but
you know,
it's like, yo, it's filled with purpose. You know, it's all purpose, man. Like it's, you know, that's what when I talked about being genuine, and, you know, and having organic things move us, you know. You talked about spirituality, because I feel like, you know, someone put in the chat a few seconds ago, it was JJ, about the spirit and moving in spirit. But spirituality and having that energy and those vibes is very important. And then that leading you is like, it's almost like, all right, I know I'm on the right path. Like, you just get this sense that you're on a path, and things are going to happen as they need to happen. Like, that's just brilliant. That I feel like so much of what we do is almost robotic in a sense. And when I hear like a story that you're sharing, I'm like, yo, it's so much purpose behind these things.
No, and it has definitely been gifted to me. I mean, all the time, and continuing once we were in New Orleans, you know, those people were continuously amongst. I mean, I met a lot more terrible people
Mhm.
in New Orleans during those years. You know,
Yeah.
who shows up to a disaster zone?
Yeah.
You know, you have some good
Yeah.
people, you
And
have a
then you
lot of
have yes.
talented people that are taking
Yes.
advantage, you know.
Yes.
So there was that total mixture there,
Yes.
but we were lucky enough. So when we did move down to New Orleans, you know, I'd made a quick trip down there to try to find to go
Mhm.
to the place, and and I didn't know New Orleans at all, where I was going, and nothing I do is too researched. You know, like I said, there's a lot of emotion with it. Sometimes it's good, sometimes it's not, but that's what it is. But uh, we ended up in a place uptown in this Carrollton neighborhood. We were there for a short time, but it was very, you know, because you got to think what housing was available at that time.
Mhm.
You
Mhm.
know, where there wasn't that much water, obviously, and um, you know, the neighborhood was really spread out, really big houses, big yards, fenced off. You know, not that I mean, the person that owned our house, that they were nice enough to us and
Mhm.
stuff, but they're yeah, we just weren't that comfortable there. It was
Living,
like,
yeah.
yeah, and we were starting to look for somewhere else to go, and we were looking at different spots and different houses, and you know, it actually might have been my brother Eric because he had access at that time to like real estate
Real
stuff.
estate, yeah, yeah, yep, yep.
That he found this spot, 1526 North Villeray Street. And so that's a street in the neighborhood of Treme, which is a neighborhood
Okay,
right behind the French Quarter.
alright,
They got some water, but they didn't get Ninth Ward
yeah.
water.
Mhm,
You know?
mhm.
So there was still places in that neighborhood, some places. So we go to check out this spot that Eric had told me about, and I have a picture from it, but the man, it must have been a Sunday, I think, but out of nowhere, I start hearing we're looking at this spot, and we're like, I don't know, guess it seems all right, and then I start hearing brass instruments getting louder
Uh-huh,
and louder,
uh-huh.
and louder, and then now what I know now is a second line parade.
Yeah,
A second
yeah.
line parade is coming down, and I'm like, what? This, I mean, just the energy.
Yes.
Uh,
Yes.
yeah, you know, I was almost just like almost walked
Is
off of them because you know
yeah.
the whole second line thing is the first line is that social club and the
Mhm.
instruments playing. The second line is everybody coming out of their house and
House,
following
yeah,
along for as
yeah,
long as it goes. And yeah, I we were like, yeah, we'll be right here. I
yeah.
did at that time. I, you know, ignorantly, I didn't know anything about the history
And
of
culture,
Tree,
yes, yep, yep.
um, which is ignorant. But I saw this vibe, and I was like, I want to know what
Yeah,
is going
yeah.
on. You know, um, so we moved to Tremaine, and we were there for quite some time before I was making pictures. Though, like I said earlier, I've got to be super comfortable to take pictures. You know,
Mhm.
yeah, that's just the way it is. I got to be super comfortable to take pictures. So a couple things helped. I mean, we had a pretty crazy summer before we got a new neighbor, Stefan Fouché, who moved in
Mhm.
right next door to us. Now he was born and raised in the Ninth Ward, but after the storm, him and his
Mhm.
family were in Houston, and
Mhm.
I mean, Stefan. I learned so much from this guy, as far as stepping up and being I don't know, being a great human. I mean, so anyway, this guy, he ended up buying a house in like the suburbs of Houston. Was like, all right, I'm gonna start over. And I don't know, after like a couple months or so, he was like, he's born and raised in the Ninth Ward.
Yeah,
He just,
like, I need to go back.
he had to
Yeah.
get back to
Yeah.
New Orleans. So when I met him, he had bought the house next door to us from his uncle. And at that time, when he bought it, this is all like only 6 months
Post
storm.
Yeah.
It was overrun with, the folks that couldn't get out of the city. And now, it was just a lot of drugs happening and stuff. And man, this dude came to town. He bought that house from his uncle. He came back to town. And, just the way that he cleared that house. I mean, it was just, he gets everybody out. And he totally redid, like every weekend, working on the house, getting some help, working the night shift at the hospital and working the daytime at Home Depot, and then working on his house. It was my relationship with Stefan that at least made me comfortable enough to photograph
start doing it,
on the block, because he was just a warm person, and his family was very warm and really was very loving with us and family like, very, very fast.
Mm-hmm.
The other thing though was Stefan was a super smart guy, and I'm not saying it was an ulterior motive, but I was living next door to him.
Mm-hmm.
And from what I learned from Stefan, so there was my house, then Stefan's house, and then the house right next to Stefan, same thing, it had been blighted and stuff. Eventually, Stefan bought the house next to him because he was like, I'm not having my girl stare at this crap. I'm just going to buy it and take care of it.
And beautify it and make sure,
And my kids would stare at that. So, in the beginning, he was friendly with us in the beginning, because I'm sure he just wanted to make sure what was going on.
Yeah. What is, yes. It's good for it. Yes.
And we were odd. We were odd for the neighborhood. My lady's Samoan Filipino, and I mean, people didn't even know what to make of her down there. Yeah. They talked to her in Spanish sometimes. They just and Stefan was just super warm. We became really tight. He would take me on these harassing fishing trips where he was just such a great shit talker, and I was such a horrible fisherman. But I just had fun hanging out. I was there for the beers and hanging out. But,
that's good stuff, man.
I slowly started photographing Stefan and his family, and then it kind of snowballed once. I was also using this. I had meant to bring it for my show and tell, but I forgot it. But I was using this really old camera at the time that had like pull-out bellows. It was really big. The size came out to here. So the thing about that, between that and Stefan, people really started approaching me like why I hadn't taken their picture yet, because this camera, this film that they were making at they actually discontinued it as I was starting to use it, and I was forced to like try to buy a lot of it before it disappeared. But it was this Polaroid film that back in the day gave you like a 4x5 negative, and it also gave you a positive.
Okay.
So with this camera, I was able to give people their picture
right on it. Yes.
And keep the negative for myself to produce. And that was another like opened things up.
Yeah.
It opened things up for people, and also just for me, because to be honest with you, you know, I originally had like a little 35 millimeter camera, and I just felt like some narc walking around, man.
Yeah, like, yep,
just with this sneaky camera and stuff, you know.
yeah.
So anyway, with that big camera, Stefan, and then just as people got to know us, you know, we were forever working on the house, and we learned the hard way just how hot it could get down there.
Down there.
So we always had a chest of water. We had like the one old cypress tree on the block shaded our front stoop. And to come to find out later, I mean, for more than 100 years before we got there, these steps, people were chilling under this tree.
That tree. Wow. So that's
because once we moved in, you know, there was times, you know, I'd come out of the house, you know, it took me a while to figure things out. Just as far as we had crowds, people just kicking it on the steps to like, I got to get into my spot.
But that was a part of that.
That was neighborhood steps. Those weren't.
You didn't even own. You didn't even.
I had a short-term lease on those steps, you know. But we always had water, and at the time we were, we just kind of became a stop to some folks at a certain time of day, with the heat between the tree, and that we had water, and that I smoked cigarettes a lot, you know.
Just come up and
there was a lot of
and talk,
and hang out
and talk, yeah.
And it was those conversations that made me comfortable, but also, you know, made people comfortable with me taking their picture, you know, because, you know, there was times, you know, someone that, you know, maybe a cousin or someone that wasn't exactly from the neighborhood could be asking Stefan or somebody that I was kicking with at the time, and I'm sitting there, you know, not only did I have a big camera, it had this big flash, you know, it was nothing subtle.
There was no discreet about it. Yeah. It was like,
and you know, and just being questioned like, yo, what?
Yeah.
What are you doing here taking pictures and stuff, you know? And, man, it was Stefan that, you know, right away was just like, man, leave that man alone. That's a good man. Yeah. That was like, you know, the thing is that Stefan had said was just, you know, it's your vibe, man. You're non-threatening. You're just, you know, once you talk to you for a little bit, they don't feel like you're, you know, which I'm not, but, you know, you at times being questioned and, you know, and just from anxiety, you can appear.
Yes, it can. Yes, exactly. Yes. And you look shady. Yep.
And I got a camera, you know,
and like you said, like, what are your intentions? Because folks fled down there with different things on their mind, you know,
a lot of intentions, photographers, I mean, amongst other people too. I mean, the number of books that I saw come out of New Orleans while I was there, just on these kind of quote unquote beautiful art books of destruction, of just page after page of people's ruined homes.
Yeah.
I mean, there was just, you know, and then also recognizing some photographers and seeing them come into the neighborhood. I mean, I saw some really, for the photo world, big name photographers, you know, fly through the neighborhood. Part of it was interesting to see how they work, and like, oh, I kind of thought that guy might be that person. You know, I got that vibe, and he is. You know, he took like 30 pictures before he said to that lady, "Do you mind
if I can use it?" Yes.
Wow. He already took 30 pictures before.
Wow.
You know, anyway.
But it's, you know, there are things like that, and let's call it what it is. It becomes exploitation. You know,
100%.
It's just straight exploitation. And I guess that's why when I look at your photography and your art, it's like I just get a sense of everything that you just explained. Like, I think that it speaks loudly of, yo, this is relationship based. This is not, I'm stopping through, I got a weekend in New Orleans. Like, this is really getting to know the folks, and the folks really getting to know you. And I
Yeah.
just think that brings a different kind of art. It's just like even with music. Sometimes when you hear, certain albums, and then when you hear the background of, hey, to do that album, we spent a year here, or we spent like, and it's like, wow, now that album makes so much more sense to you because you get that context. And I think that that's what your photography, what it does. Do you mind if I pull up the,
Yeah, let's go for it.
Yeah, I wanted to just, because you had showed this picture here, for our audience who's able to watch. But this was the one that you had shown us a clipping of, right? Was this from the clipping?
So the interesting thing about this is, so all of our wedding photography so this is a slightly different picture, but people we were volunteering with at Acorn for months afterwards kept sending us their pictures that they took.
Oh, wow. Wow.
So all these wedding photographers. So this is just one that I include with my stuff. This is not a picture that I took.
Oh, wow.
And that's Brian there in the
okay.
There. All right, let's see here. So this is Vincent. This was our stop in Orlando before getting to New Orleans.
Okay.
And Vincent, I don't know if we'll have time, but my other body of work that the slideshow that I have is New York photography, and Vincent is in a bunch of it. He was a good friend of mine in New York, and but we had stopped to see him. I hadn't seen him in a little while, and he saw us off to New Orleans. And then this was just during that first trip to New Orleans as we're walking around, and this is what I'm thinking about afterwards when I'm in Seattle and they're talking about things are getting back to normal. And we're like,
this is the vision you had, images that you have. Yeah.
What I'm saying, thinking about, and like, it definitely is not. And then Miss Paia on our wedding day, this was right before we got married.
Wow. That's awesome. So what year is this? This is 01?
No, so us getting married in New Orleans was 2006.
So this is 2006.
Yeah, in New
Orleans. It's a Katrina. Yes. Okay. All right. Yes. 2006. All right.
And then let's see. This is that same first trip that we're just seeing what's going on in the city and stuff. And yeah. This is once we're down there. This was our backyard, actually. That's my dog. The other thing that made us stand out was we had 6 dogs. We showed up with 2 dogs in New Orleans, and we ended up rescuing a few more. We ended up with 5 dogs by the time we were done. Okay, so second line parade.
Wow.
Yeah, so it was, it was one of, it was a situation like this that I saw that I was, I had to know about. And, a big part of it too was just, there's not a lot of costuming in this picture, but you could see the amount of time folks
put into,
to all this, was incredible. And this had to have been like 2007, still a lot going on. And then you really saw the power of community as far as people getting together and spending this time together and passing down traditions and stuff.
That's what I was going to say. Continuing traditions,
right.
Right. Because it's times like that with Katrina that, I think are the times where we got to hold on to traditions and values and things that keep us strong. But it can easily, because of a survival mechanism is in place, that you can easily begin to forget about these things,
Right.
and say, hey, can we do it? Or, should we do it? And, but just like that. And I remember visiting New Orleans, and it was post Katrina.
Okay.
It was, I believe it was 07. Was it either 07 or 08? I think it was 07. Because it was like when things just started reopening down there.
Yeah.
And when you explained, the parade, like it's a vibe, like you said, a vibe, there's an energy and a vibe that is just like it's like, I can feel it right now. Like, it's just one of those feelings,
you can't avoid it. And if you're like myself, someone that doesn't naturally dance a lot, you still can't help it. It doesn't
yes.
You can't help it.
Yes.
It's
yes. Same here.
And then so I've got pictures throughout. I mean, I won't comment on every single one, but the Treme, and at least just the street that we were on, every couple months it kind of changed as people were either able to make it back to New Orleans, or just a new partier or a new gentrifier or whatever it was came. So the makeup of the block was constantly changing. And man, I just I got one. Can't help but tell a story about this. So like I said, I had 5 dogs, and I would walk all 5 dogs. I look like a dog walker out there. So I had that, and I got this big old school camera hanging on my neck. And then one day I'm walking around, and Claiborne Avenue, which is this main avenue that is through Treme, very historic, like the first Black Mardi Gras, and still Black Mardi Gras is happening underneath. There's now an I-10 overpass. That Claiborne Avenue back in the day was oak trees, and they knocked down like 200 oak trees to put this interstate through the neighborhood. So there's a lot of traffic there and stuff. Anyway, I'm on one side of the street, and I this kid and Blue, his dog, are screaming at me from the other side of this busy street, and I can't hear what he's saying, but he's screaming at me, and now he's running at me with that dog. That dog is coming at us, and I have 5 dogs with me, and I'm like, man, what is what? And he's like, hey man, you got to take my picture.
Wow.
Saw the camera on my neck and was like, that's a pretty
wow.
Dog. He's looking down at his dog. He's like, that's a pretty dog. You got to take our picture. And so I don't know where, we ended up kicking it, for maybe a half hour. Took a bunch of pictures and just talking dogs, because I had 5 dogs, and his dog was obviously really cool. I mean, the ears are up a bit because I'm on the side with 5 dogs and my camera.
Yeah, you got that camera. Like,
I'm stepping on leashes. It was
that's a cool story, man. That's a cool story.
A really fun day that day. Let's see. And then just Miss P, when we first got down there, she had picked up work really fast when we got down there painting houses. And man, within like the first month, she had an accident off of a roof and broke. Yeah, broke. I mean, thankfully only broke her arm. Wow. But so part of part of my storytelling, why, you know, I'm not so comfortable with like, oh, it's documentary, or, you know, that in telling stories, I mean, because of the context thing, you know, that you had mentioned also with like storytelling, is that because I haven't always done it this way, that I was in the pictures, or that Ia was in the pictures. But for context, that, you know, I'm not a fly on the wall in these situations, you know, that, you know, our experience is, it is part of the story. So,
Yes.
and it's, you know, yeah, so this is Stefan's house right here.
Oh, wow.
That he had fixed up, and yeah, it used to be yeah, it was a really interesting house. It originally was like a church. It had this, it was really long and skinny, but it was kind of L-shaped toward the back, and
I see it. Yeah, I can see on the back. So to the right of it, that's part of the house. That's not like a
yeah,
second house in the back. Okay.
it's still part of his
Yeah.
house.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it was all you know, walk through one room to the other to get to, you know.
So yes. Yes. It's almost like you're going into multiple. And it's funny because even the show, Treme, really like kind of brought you to, that's why I'm like, when you said you lived there, I'm like, wow, like where else would I want to live if I was in, you know, New Orleans? Like that's crazy.
Yeah.
You know, that, and you know, you're kind of going into the historical significance of that place. And I, you know, I know in some of your work, you did things with the freedmen, the scallywags, and
Right.
the carpetbaggers, you know, like those, like that history. And when you start talking about being a fly on the wall, you were the opposite. You like really immersed yourself into all of that.
Right. Yeah. And really it was, you know, I obviously was a photographer when we moved down there, but the relationships and stuff, you know, that's what allowed me to photograph. You know, without them, I really would have had close to no pictures. You know, I had some house shots and what everybody else had, as far as, you know, there was a lot of destruction to take pictures of and stuff. But so this is Stefan after work.
Oh,
you know, so off the night shift at the hospital, in between going to the Home Depot job, you know, he'd come and grab me and
take you out.
And it was all him, man. His boat, his, you know, he knew I was no help, as far as I didn't know how to drive a boat. I didn't even know how to do my own line on my fishing. You know, it was like, you know, the first couple of times, like, why is he still inviting me?
Wow.
Because I'm a nuisance out here. I'm
I'm more of a hindrance.
Yeah. So yeah, this is Stefan.
That's awesome, man.
And then
wow.
And then band practice. So I'm all trying to touch the screen. So this is just this is Stefan's house is on one side of my house.
Okay.
This is the other house. We're right at the end of the block. So the houses change direction right at the end of the block to this next cross street. So this is our next door neighbor here, looking over. And then this is there was McDonough 35. High school was like 2 blocks away from us. So this is band practice coming through, which was another amazing thing all the time that you would, I mean, you know, when you say high school band practice, depending on where you're from in the country or from where you're at,
it's something different, right?
It might sound like, but no, this was like professional music being played on the street. You know,
because that, you know what, that's another point that you bring up that makes me think about my time when I visited, is that these kids were like young, man, playing these instruments, and making these instruments go, like talk, like they were kids, they were
Oh,
kids.
oh, yeah. No, I have been totally amazed plenty of times on just skills on brass instruments at
Yeah,
that age.
that's a hot pit. That's a hot picture.
So this right here would just be, the same. You could see the same houses in the
Hmm.
background. So this is just I was working. Like I said, I always had this camera slung around me, and I think I
Hmm.
was working on the roof, and then just the cop activity on the block. I mean, it was wild, and there was plenty of wild stories, and with the police and stuff, and FBI knocking on your door in the middle of the night if you had seen or heard, and picking up casings off of
Yeah.
your steps and stuff. And you know the we had, I had talked to you about editors, and I mean, for writing and for photography and stuff, and my edits have this story for me is still emerging. I because I the you had talked about, the title for this book that I'm trying to get published of this work,
Hmm.
is the Freedmen, Scallywags, and Carpetbaggers,
Hmm.
and you know just relating to Reconstruction era,
Hmm.
um, and um, an early edit I had done of this work. There's plenty that you could show of, like, that this neighborhood is in bad shape, or these bad things are happening and stuff, and the in the editing, finding that line of, you do, for me personally, I I do have to show a certain amount of what's going on that's not right,
Hmm. Hmm.
but not turning it into, like you had mentioned, that,
Hmm.
yeah, the only thing why people are looking at this is so they could gawk over
Yeah.
drug addicts or guns, or,
Yeah.
or prostitutes, and and even with those things existing, it is not the point at all for me, and trying to tell the story, and for me, the questioning that's in my head while putting this together is how and why.
Mm.
Not like, yeah, I could. It's really easy to see where it's at
But
now, but when you look at these houses, and you
yeah.
look at the craftsmanship on these houses, and then you start to look at the history of, like, you know Treme lays claim, and I know there's a few other neighborhoods, as being one of the first black suburbs and
Hmm.
neighborhoods, and that, how did this all go down?
Yes.
And that's those are the questions that I'm trying to pose, and that, I've been finding out about throughout the years, because now this work, some folks might be like, yo, I mean, this is a while ago now, like, but to find out the attack,
Hmm.
the the attack that this neighborhood has been under since the beginning.
That's what I was gonna say. Yeah, we're not even talking about just the last 20 years. You're talking about multiple. Yes, yes.
And
You
yeah,
know.
of this neighborhood that people built themselves, man. I mean,
Yes.
literally built
Mhm.
themselves. How did it get to the state? There was just a few times uh, early on in New Orleans that it was actually this house across the street from me. that was in really bad shape that, you know, it dawned on me like, that's not hurricane.
Yeah.
You know, that's like neglect that happened over there.
Yes.
And then, yeah, how did this happen? And then finding out things like that the interstate I-10, you know, that Claiborne Avenue was, I mean, they call it a neutral ground there, middle ground, you know, big grassy area between the sides of the street, and wide enough to play like baseball and all sorts of sports on and stuff, you know, real part of the community. So, you know, that's one major thing that, you know, as I'm living there, that I'm finding out like this I-10 ripped the neighborhood in half.
Just like that. And that's, yes.
You know, besides the 200 trees, there was like, you know, hundreds of houses and businesses that just got torn down to make that. And the fact that that interstate was supposed to go along the Mississippi and through the French Quarter. But at the time, the French Quarter having enough money and being white, they were able to say, no, not in this neighborhood. But this was happening during the 60s, you know, that they were able to slip it in and just tear down this, you know, people were occupied with a lot of other things, you know, and the neighborhood did try to fight it. It was, you know, the system didn't work.
And that, you know, I think that in going through your work, that's what I love about it, is that you're telling a story. And it pushed me, man. Like, your work pushed me to start researching other things. You know, like it pushed me to be like, all right, I need to find out more about, and even that term scallywags, like that's a term that's used a lot, you know.
And you know, the carpet, the title came about to me as at least as a working title, is that around 2010, I was a part of this photo show down in Houston. And for photographers, I mean, there's much bigger, but this photo festival, the Houston Photo Festival, is a pretty big deal. And at that time, I hadn't really shown any work, you know, at galleries or anything like that. And I had some stuff up on the internet, and the curator got in touch with me and had seen my work and asked me to participate in this photo show down there. And man, you know, it was, I had just left New Orleans. I had my first child on the way. I don't exactly remember why I jumped onto this story, but I'm gonna keep going with it. Just that it was sort of I felt desperation at the time, as far as we were leaving New Orleans. My lady was like 8 months pregnant. She's got a really big family in Seattle. You know, I was working little gigs here and there. I was working at Jazz Fest, at Essence Festival, like the art department, doing whatever, you know, no sort of career going on. And she, and we knew, and she probably knew way better than I did, that we were going to need help. We were going to need help in all its forms, you know? But anyway, leaving there, you know, with a little bit of feeling desperate, I gave a bunch of photographs to the curator, and I let him edit it. Not that I didn't see it before it was put up, but, and so, because I don't know if we'll get to it, but I know I had one of the questions of like, can you talk about a mistake? Mistake that you made.
Yes.
And I have many, but here's one. Just that, you know, working at this desperate place, you know. Anyway, so this guy does this edit of my work, and not to make myself feel better, but man, there was photographers involved in this photo show that like I knew as like idols to me as far as they had published. They seemed like they were doing it, and they put me amongst them. They used some of my images to do the press for the show. I mean, ahead of some people that I thought were
some
like
major, yeah.
But the thing was, is the edit this guy did was not my story. But at that desperate time, I thought, if my foot gets in the door, then I could tell the whole story.
Tell a story, yeah.
But that was totally wrong, man.
Yeah.
Because I let it get into the world out of context.
Wow.
Just leaving it up to people to read the way they wanted.
Yeah.
With the way that this curator had put it together. So I forgot why I brought up that mistake.
Yeah, because you were getting into, because I brought up the carpetbaggers and then the
right, exactly.
and you started going into the history of that, and then you providing that historical context to it, and then that's when you got onto the story of telling the story of
Right. So with that, thank you. I remember now. With that, so my photos, they got some good press from like the Wall Street Journal and some places that I was like, all right, like maybe this was the right move, and I'm going to be able to tell the story now. And then the Houston Press, like they wrote like the worst article, like about me as a person.
Wow.
Like, the thing was though, is that, it was my fault. I let it get out into the world out of context. Yeah. It took me some years to realize it. I have to take
the accountability for it.
But in one of the articles, talked about my carpetbagger like moves, moving down to New Orleans. Now, the lady that wrote the article did zero research. I mean, she said she must have been on the internet and saw my pops in a suit and said that I came from a rich white family from the Jersey Shore, and all this stuff that right away I was like, well, that's not right. But some of the things that she said to me, not said to me, but wrote, to be honest, I don't think I even knew exactly what a carpetbagger was or what the definition was, but I knew it kind of didn't have good connotations. And also from that photo show, they put out like a big book of all the work that has happened in the show. And it was crazy, because this photo festival invited me to be a part of it. But when the book came out, man, they trashed me in their own book. I mean, trashed me and really attacked me as just a person, as far as that I was taking advantage of poor Black people. And man, that really knocked me down. So this is like 2010, and now I'm having my second kid, and man, I definitely got lost for a little while, until, to be honest, until I looked up carpetbagger. I mean, I looked that up, and then it led me onto this, and it led me onto that, and although she was wrong in calling me a carpetbagger, from what she was perceiving, what she saw at that show, I see why she said and what she wrote. But then just finding out just the whole history of the term of carpetbaggers and scallywags really is just derogatory if it's a white supremacist or, saying it to somebody else, it's actually not, but the connotation is negative.
Yes.
But the actual people are not. And the scallywags, just being Southerners that, were for, for human rights of Black people and voting rights and after Reconstruction. So that's how, I mean, it took a while to kind of come to this title, but that's how it came about. We called a carpetbagger at first.
And that, and I didn't know that.
Yeah.
I didn't know that bit that you just shared. But it's like there's some ownership that happened there.
Oh yeah.
And I know, and anyone who's ever gone through that type of experience, especially with the press, there's like you talk about grief. There's stages that you go through of like straight grief.
Right.
I've been there, and it's and also when the story that's being told is not like
right.
The folks telling the story didn't do their homework, and
right.
This story was put together for one purpose,
right.
To defame or to just tear you apart, reputation wise and such. So, but even through that, there's stages of that process that I know I went through, in terms of like where you do reach a point. First, you're at that why me? Like, why is this happening to me? Like, dude, like I'm here trying to, I'm about this work. I'm doing the right thing. I'm doing it the right way. It's like you're feeling like, why me?
Yeah.
And then you start going to this where you start saying, well, why did that person write that? Then you start looking deeper, and like you said, you research, and then there's a piece of ownership where you say, okay, well, let me find what I own in this.
Yeah. Yeah, no. And that was a huge awakening for me, as far as the way I started to edit my work and just making sure that there's context.
Yes.
For things, because an edit of a couple pictures can change it up.
What it can do, yeah.
And then leaving, if there's no text, and that, so right now I've been working on this photo book of this work, and that's, there's a tricky thing to that as far as text, and I'm a photographer. I'm not a historian. There's people that do.
Yes.
It's like just mentioning tricky thing as far as when it comes to the photo books, as far as where and how and what type of text, I've kind of
connected. Yeah.
I've kind of worked out for myself that it's the personal stories and stuff that because like I said, I'm not a writer, and I'm pretty good because I like to dive into things as far as gathering it and stuff. But the written word is a whole nother animal. Wow. Communication.
It's I just put up your IG, man, because I really want to push people to your page so that they can really start seeing more of the comprehensive work that you're doing. And
it's all, as we're talking.
Yeah.
We don't have to stop. We could keep on going.
Is all black and white?
Yeah, in New Orleans, all black and white. It was, really, I'm very DIY and by any means necessary, as far as, I don't make a living from doing this, there's no sponsors. So really in the beginning, it was black and white. Film was cheaper for me because I could develop it myself. I could print it myself. So it was just cheaper. And then aesthetically also, I like it, but New Orleans is a tough place because it's so colorful.
Yes. Yes.
And, but I had watched this movie, Down by Law. a story that takes place in New Orleans, but it's shot in black and white, and I really like to kind of like with what you're doing. I love reading artists' bios to get context where they came from to get to where they're at and what they went through. And so when I looked into the cinematographer for that movie, he was talking about the decision to do it black and white over color. And because you naturally, for me at least, I naturally think of New Orleans as a colorful place. You know, it's Caribbean colors and just, you know, color combos that you're not going to see in Seattle.
That are beautiful, like, and you would never imagine like these colors. Yes.
Right. But as far as number one was, it was, I could afford to do it. Was with the black and white. But then I guess maybe it just made me feel better. But the cinematographer talking about the his choice of black and white, just because the colors were so overwhelming. You know, that after a while trying to make pictures, you're starting to like put pictures together because like this orange,
this color,
and be harder, you know. They say, and I don't know, but you got to be a tiny bit smarter for the color work. It's another step. It's another thing to deal with, you know.
To put it together aesthetically, I guess it becomes
and not just get tricked by the, oh wow, that's a bright color, let me take a picture. Like,
wow,
it's not a very interesting picture, it's just bright green.
And it's funny, you know, in one of like, obviously, you know, someone that when you talk about photography, I think of a Gordon Parks, right? And one of my favorite books, Invisible Man, by Ralph Ellison, you know, Gordon Parks, you know, he put together, you know, a publication that he titled Invisible Man. I think it was Gordon Parks and Ralph Ellison in Harlem, right? And it's like this collection though of black and white. And he did a lot of black and white stuff, as you know, that is just like powerful. It's like crazy, you know, powerful. And even though it's black and white, it really grabs you. And that's why, you know, when I was looking at your work, I'm like, yo, I get that feeling, you know, that Gordon Parks when I'm looking through some of his stuff, especially, you know, and I can only imagine when you start talking about the relationships and building the relationships, you can sense that, you know, in certain work. You could just get that feeling, you know. And then when I would go read the background stories of the time that Parks would spend with folks, it's very, you know, it's very similar to what you're explaining.
Right. Yeah, no, and just while you're mentioning Gordon Parks, I mean, one of my mentor, Joseph Rodriguez, similar in that, you know, I can't even imagine the inner energy that these men possess, as far as being able, you know, when you look at the different types of work that they were able to make, you know, to cross from social documentary to fashion to movies, just blows my mind.
Just constant reinvention.
Has to stick to one thing.
Yes. It's constant. Yeah. It's almost like that mountain that I talked about. It's like going up and down, like they're climbing like these mountains, like, but they're getting to the top of the you know, like, and they say, oh, now let's climb this one.
They're not going down and finding another one.
Yeah, no, you're right. You're it's brilliant. And I guess that's what that brilliance is, man.
Yeah. No, as soon as you said Gordon Parks and we're talking about color and black and white, I mean, it's his subtle use of color that makes me want to shoot color. I mean, I do, especially with digital these days, it's a bit easier, and I'm much more digital now, really because of the time factor. I don't have time to sit in a dark room. I got two boys and no one's waiting. I'm doing my art in my dark. Leave me alone.
They ain't trying to hear that. No.
So I do shoot some color more, but it's tough. But yeah, his subtle use of color is amazing.
Agreed.
Let's see here. So another important person that pops up in the bigger edit of this work is Cece, the female in this picture, and she I took a lot of pictures of her over, I don't know, over about 2 years. And man, she had, like a lot of people, and it was very overwhelming in the beginning, but she spent days on a bridge, right after the storm. She ended up in Arkansas for like over a year before she made it back to New Orleans. And she wasn't with her, she wasn't with family. She was solo. And yeah, she super one of those people that I met that was like we were supposed to meet each other. When she found out what I was up to, and she was all down. I mean, she would stop by. I mean, she had a very hard life going on besides Katrina, Katrina related elements that, but man, she would come by the house just when she kind of needed a break, man. We would just BS, and she was the one. She would come over and different stuff sometimes, and it just turned into a really like into this friendship where her youngest here, baby Derek, I brought her to the hospital when she gave Derek, and I have a picture of Derek that they wouldn't let me in. He was a bit premature and stuff, but some pictures for me and stuff. And there was a handful of times, there was a random time that I think I was taking like a street picture, a picture down the street, and some guy started hollering at me what the F was I taking pictures of and stuff. And I think I was just sort of down that day or something, and she happened to come by that day, and we were friends, so I was telling her what happened and stuff. And man, she was just one of those people, like the instance of someone just saying a little something to you. It was just one of those things where like she was having a real hard time, but now she's telling me like, you're out here doing the right thing. And yeah, I'm gonna be really fucking pissed if you don't keep doing this, because
what you're doing.
You told me when you first started taking my picture that your intentions were to make a book someday, or maybe put fucking museum. So get back,
stay on that grind. And in that, there's in a lot of work, when we do work with folks who may be exploited, disenfranchised, vulnerable, there's narrative and then there's counter narrative. And the way that I see it is that counter narrative work is so important, because just like what drove you back to New Orleans, you and your partner, Paya, right? Is it Paya? Paya. You and your partner back to New Orleans was like, they're trying to create this narrative that, everything is great. Let's get back to the way we've always been. And you wanted to make sure that counter narrative was being told. Like, and that's the story of the people. And that's in a lot of times, the people who are entrenched in these situations, they don't have the ability to tell their story, and they don't have a platform to create that space for a counter narrative of, no, this is what it really is.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
That's and that, you know, it's funny because that's a lot of what this show is about creating spaces to share folks' stories in narratives or counter narratives, but just giving a platform. And there's so many people that once they get a chance to talk about their experiences and their story, they'll call me and they'll say, "Man, I can't believe that was therapeutic for me." Like,
Right.
you know, like people are like, "That was therapeutic." Because it made me reflect on some things. I got a chance to talk through some things and process through, because how many times do we really get a chance? Folks always say, "How are you doing?" Or "What do you do?" And you're supposed to answer that question in 30
Right.
seconds. You know, like, how many times do you get like an hour to really talk about, or 2 hours to talk about like what you really love and what you believe in and what you're
Yeah.
passionate about, you
Yeah.
know?
And this is I was really excited when you hit me up. And to be honest, a bit surprised. I had been watching and seeing some of the folks you had on,
Mhm.
and also just seeing who you are these days, man.
Yeah.
That just like, talk to me.
Come on, bro. Like, you
But but um but with the storytelling that you're doing, I mean, it you know, I had come up on this man. A friend put me on to. Have you heard of Clyde Woods?
Why does that name sound familiar? What does he do?
So
That name sounds familiar.
he has passed away. He's no longer with us. But he was the head of, I believe, Black Studies at in California at some university,
UCLA? Okay.
CLA. But he's got a few books. He's got this thing from one of his books, the blues epitomology,
Okay.
and it's the the basic idea, and I hope not to butcher it, but is basically just when you're looking at history, where is your base of history?
Yes.
Where is your base of truths? Where is your
Mhm.
starting?
Mhm.
And his belief that that the history for the southern states starts with the blues, because if you the only way for us, you know, to get the recorded or written history from folks from back then
Mhm.
that weren't the conquerors, or weren't the ones writing the supremacist
Mhm.
history, you know, it's in the music there.
Yes.
And I really jumped onto this because I
Mhm.
felt like, you know, and you know, I don't feel like a book smart person, as far as I'm not a great reader.
Mhm.
But so many things that I have gone to hip hop music has informed me. You know, when I
Yes.
start to look back, what has made me start to think about certain things, or why have I looked into something
Mhm.
that, you know,
Mhm.
one little line about something that happened that I'm like, first I want to know, like, you know, are they talking about something real, or, and then finding out like this whole history. So
Yeah.
it's
Yes.
where you're getting your history from. So my point being, as far as you doing your thing and having it on these different platforms and storytelling on different platforms,
Mhm.
I think is so important for many reasons. One, to keep these stories, because otherwise we just, you know, we hope not
Yes.
to be leaving the kids with some fake ass books that has
Yes.
half a truth in it.
Yes.
And the other thing is for people like myself that, yo, I need to hear it. I need
Mhm.
to see it.
Yes.
Then,
Yes.
then maybe I can read it. You know, that
Yes.
people
Yo.
can absorb in different ways. So if you could get it on the internet, if you know, for me, I make these small handmade books. You know, they call zines, and you know they're a cheap way to put stuff out. And you know, recently, you know, I make small editions, and it's one way to hit a certain part of the population. But then, you know, you know, people like, I've got this Instagram now, you know, and as far as Instagram goes, I don't have a lot of followers, but yo, I've never talked in front of 500 people before. I have at least 500 followers that I'm like, yo, I'm connected.
This is yes. Yep.
You know, that at any given point, not that everybody's looking or stopping on my stuff, but there's a possibility that it's going to pass them by.
Yes.
I have 500 chances today to communicate what, you know, what I'm trying to talk about.
Bro.
So I think it's very important, and I'm psyched that you're doing this.
I'm equally as psyched to have connected with you and reconnected through social media, because like I said, to prove your point, I've learned because your work has pushed me to start researching things that I wasn't researching or wasn't privy to. So it goes back to in hip hop. In hip hop, you mentioned hip hop music, and how ironic that hip hop music, the Black Star concert tickets you're going to get, put you in right online with the photography. So it's like, but that's what hip hop music is. It is to me, it is like the perfect collection and combination of so many different genres, first of all, brought together, but also counter narrative music. Hip hop music is counter narrative. Hip hop music is the music, and that's why a lot of young people love it, is because it is the thing that you're not getting in school, the thing that you're not getting in a textbook. Is going to send you down a path of discovering different things. And it saved my life, because it, you know, it sent me down so many paths to start researching and finding out more and learning more. You talked about Black, you listen to a Talib Kweli album, just listen to one, or Mos Def. It's like the references can send you to spaces and places that you're like blown away. Blown away. So I definitely, and that is, to me, storytelling is the blood of any culture. And what you're doing is keeping cultures alive by telling stories through photographs and art. What I'm trying to do on this platform is doing my space in terms of the spoken language, you know, and if enough of us little folks with 50 followers or 500 followers, we continue to do that. You talked about energy. You talked about, you know, being in that mode. If enough of us continue to do that, it's going to change the world.
Yeah.
It's, you know, it's going collectively. This is the word that changes the world. And that's why I'm so excited to do it. And that's why I'm always looking for folks like you to bring your stories to the forefront, and the things that you're doing and have done to the forefront.
Man, I appreciate to be in the group of people that you've had on so far, and I look forward to seeing who else. Man,
I'm gonna keep it going, bro. It is here. I'm gonna tell you, like the brother was like, take our picture. There's so many conversations that I'm having with folks that are like, yo, I got to get on the show. I got to get on. And I'm like, I got to get you on the show too, you know? But it's like, you know, working a full-time job and trying to make sure I'm doing this piece, you know, but it starts putting you in, but it also starts saying, my son was like, well, why don't you just do that full-time? And I'm like, bro, you're right. But I also got to make sure you got a place to live, and you got like this. You know, but it's something to be said for him even saying, because he sees how passionate I am about this.
No, and you know, and even that, just that part of it, of your son seeing you follow, passion, and that's something I, you know, as far as me still pushing on as an artist and stuff, you know, is that is that example, just as far
Yes.
as, seeing, following what you think is important and following that passion. And I think, yeah, the more that we can give that example, I think the
The
better.
better off, yeah, the better off our children are gonna be, one of the things, Craig, bro, this has been a dope conversation, man. It's crazy. Like, you go from we haven't spoken, we haven't seen each other in shoot, we went back, what was it, 2003, maybe? I think that was the wedding, Amy and Eric.
Yeah,
Um, but it's almost like we just spent 2.5 hours just, you know, like, like we talk every day.
right.
And you've been, what you've shared, man, your story, the transparency, the journey, the ups and the downs, and then being vulnerable. I really appreciate it because I really think that it speaks a lot to who you are, so folks get a chance to get a sense of who you are, the texture of who you are. But also I know it's speaking to people out there, a lot of your situations of folks like, oh wow, I can learn from that, or I can learn, like, I know it, man.
Yeah.
I know it. And I'm really grateful for you sharing that. um and with that said, though, one of the things I like to ask all guests is if there was advice that you could go back and give your high school self or your younger self, what that advice would be, and why.
So I think two things come to mind. Uh, One would, to be a little bit during that high school, to be a little bit more reckless.
Mm,
I feel like now I take that. I'm not going to take credit for it. I take that from hearing something that Trevor Noah's mom said to him about youthful recklessness. That the times to make, they
yep.
happen throughout life, but man, you
Yes.
have this pocket of time that you could really turn out the you can, and I'm not talking about recklessness as far as
Yeah.
intentionally hurt anybody,
Yes. Yes.
but taking those chances, and not playing it safe,
Yes.
um, that, and don't be so serious. I was like a wound up
Mm,
type, and that's the thing, I've learned in my older age, perception is crazy. I mean, I got brothers that I lived in the same house with that we got, slightly different perceptions on the
hmm hmm
exact, um, but yeah, just not to be so serious.
I,
I mean, I don't know how I came off, but I was very a tense kid.
and you know what, and that's why I think it goes to that identity piece that we talked about earlier, is that in that, you know I'm just talking about me. I started to identify you through wrestling. If anyone said, and
Right.
even when you think about wrestling, is there anything more intense in terms of a high school sport of
Yeah.
what it takes you? Listen, I have so much respect for for those who wrestle, because I really think that there is the amount of commitment of time, diet. Like you're actually on a diet commitment in
Yeah.
high school from
Right.
like that's just crazy, and then you're going out into battle by
Yeah.
yourself, but still have a team that you're competing for,
Yeah.
um in front of everyone, and it's, to me, it's one of those, it's the high school sport to me that is so connected to life. It is so connected to life, and I've always respected it. I've never gotten onto a mat.
Yeah.
Coach George always tried to get me onto a mat, but I never got onto a mat. He always said, "You're perfect for wrestling." I was like, "Coach, you say that to everybody. I know you." But 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 I think that even that part of that has to be the seriousness that he creates, like, you
Right.
know, like this mode of like focus and being intentional and being serious and,
Yeah.
you know,
Well,
so
and at that time I was sold. I
you
was sold.
know,
It's like, this is what I need to do. I'm sold on it. But it's funny. It's one of those like other side of the fence type things, because from my perspective, it was the team sports that
Mhm.
that not that I had more respect for, but that I was just like, wow, because the wrestling thing, I felt like, part of it is that
It's
it's just me. So that's
yeah,
one of the, oh, it's just you. But the thing about the team sport is being able to work with people and have these
yeah,
relationships. We
yeah.
still had a team, but when it came
True.
to wrestling, it was just you.
Yes.
And
Yes.
and I'm just saying, it's
Yes.
funny that you say that because I always looked at like, football players and the sports that soccer players where you
Mhm.
had to really be working with
Yeah.
people or,
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. Collectively at the same time in the same space on the yeah, yeah, and I get that. I definitely get that. And the weird part of wrestling is it dwindles down the later the season goes to where you go into a wrestling room where there
right,
was once 50 folks in there, kids wrestling to I
right,
remember going in, it's like three kids, coaches working with three kids who've advanced to higher
right,
levels of state and they're driving in cars now as opposed to bus. So it is like this kind of like survival of the fittest
yeah,
type of thing going on with it too. Yes.
yeah, interesting,
You know, but that's just an outside perspective. That's me giving an outside perspective of watching,
yeah,
you all go through that process, man.
yeah,
You're watching it, cutting weight and all that stuff. But then the other thing of, being able taking risk, and I think that that's important,
yeah,
that risk taking piece, as in being young and being okay with making mistakes.
right,
Um,
and that's the bigger piece of it, the being
yes,
to get practice
yes,
and be okay
yes,
with the mistakes, man,
yes, yes,
because you can focus on that mistake for too long.
yes,
You
and
you got
yes, and I think that's really great advice, to young people, and it's something that I always share with young people is make mistakes, learn from those mistakes, but then be ready to get off the mat, so to speak, and
right.
and start this process again. Um, Craig, man, it's been real, bro. I haven't.
Absolutely fine, man. I was worried that I was gonna run out of steam at about 45
You
minutes.
listen,
I have 2 slideshows. I was like, "Man, I need to take time if I run out of things to," but no, that was
bro.
amazing,
Nah,
and like we were just, in gym class yesterday or
I
something.
that's what I said. It
You
was
know, people that, I'm friends with and that I people that I like, that I get a good vibe from, I can
mhm,
always do this because it's the people that I can jump back in
yes,
and
yes,
just talk.
true.
I know the folks that, you know, when I can't
It's
jump back
yeah,
in,
yeah, yeah.
I've changed a little bit.
No, I hear you. I and I know I have that same energy, and that's why, and that's why I love doing this, um, because I think that there's a lot of us that connect, and we have this energy, and we can make magic happen, for this community. And I really thank you for accepting it, and I send these requests to folks, and sometimes people say I'm shy, I don't think, or I don't think I've done enough, and I'm like, listen, every little bit helps. And those are the
Right.
folks I want. The folks who think
Yeah,
they're doing extraordinary things, but they're ordinary people who are just doing extraordinary things. And
yeah,
those are the stories that I
mhm,
want.
yeah.
Those are the stories that I want. So I appreciate you, brother. And thank you, for blessing us today with your art, with your path, your journey, your story. It's been very powerful. And I urge everyone who's out who's watching, please check out Craig's stuff on Instagram and get your hands on, what are they, Zines? Is it the
So really, if you just follow my Instagram, then
it's on
as I make some, I put it out there. And
okay.
usually, the way I roll these days is once Instagram start, because before Instagram I was on like Blogger or something.
Mm-hmm.
I have a graveyard of platforms following me, but I usually leave on the last platform where I'm moving to. So whatever's popular, I'm on there because that's where
that's where the people are going to be. Yep.
Right. So
True.
that's where
True.
I
Well,
appreciate you, and we I'll be in touch with you outside of this. I would love you again, and I feel like there's some sort of writing photography thing in our future.
Listen, that's what I was going to say. I can definitely see us connecting on a project. I could even, what we talked about earlier before the show, I can definitely see us connecting on a project. So definitely keep me in mind. If something comes up on your end, and I'm going to do the same, because I have something in mind that I shared that we talked about before. But I really, really, really want to get together some kind of history, of educators like we talked about. So, and maybe that'll be the thing. You never know.
Could be it. That might be
Never
it.
know.
We'll
So
talk.
yeah, we'll talk to the community out there. Thank you for joining in tonight. We had another special show. This is like 2 weeks in a row that we've done some 2.5 hour conversations. Like it's really picking up, but it doesn't even seem that way. It doesn't even seem that long. It's like we just sat here for an hour. But thank you all for tuning in. We will be back. We took a 2-week recess, but we will be back next week on Thursday with another guest, which I'll get some stuff out this weekend in terms of who our next guest is going to be and what type of things we're going to talk about. Until then, please take care of yourselves, take care of your families, and be well, and peace to you all.
It's a 9-chord banger. Dr. Ross dropping knowledge to the masses. Man, you now tuned in to purpose and practice. Purpose and practice. Keep your mental sharp, learn all the tactics. Dr. Ross dropping knowledge to the masses. Man, you now tuned in to purpose and practice. Purpose and practice. Podcast.